Welcome to the Relationships Inside Out podcast with Doctors Gregory Siebert and Kimberly Murray, licensed marriage and family therapists. Join them on this journey as they explore the ins and outs of relationships.
All right, welcome to Relationships Inside Out podcast. So today we're talking about self-care. This concept seems very kind of normal and, buzzy to us in the therapy world, but this is a concept that seems remiss in kind of the general population that doesn't have any knowledge about it.
Often when I mention self-care, people say two things. What is that? And I'll tell them and they'll say, but wait, that's selfish. And there's this resistance from clients or friends or even family of, I'll get to that. I don't have time for that. Or I've got to take care of so-and-so first, or I've got to prioritize my job or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, it seems to be a really difficult construct for people to really adopt in regularly.
And it's so important on different levels. One is just the balance in life, right? Burnout comes when we're only taking care of other people. So, that's a big fact. So, and it also helps with depressed mood, right? The thing I have for clients that I have them do is schedule it like they would work. It should be just as important, right? Why do we prioritize these things that drain us? Why not prioritize things that kind of rejuvenate us?
And I do the same with my clients. And sometimes it's not just the bubble baths, although I'm sure we'll get to it. I love me some bubble baths, but it is, I have some clients who every couple hours on their phone have an alarm that goes off that says, take a deep breath or slow down or drop your shoulders. It can be things like that. It can be saying no when we don't want to do something that doesn't feel good or authentic. And then it can be those things that maybe we more regularly think of. So being outside, taking a bath, whatever it might be.
Let's go back to the no. That's very important in the context of boundaries. Why do you think boundaries, from your perspective, are important in terms of the context of self-care?
Oh, boundaries are critical. And I think I said this in the last one. Boundaries are going to come across everything we talk about because they really, from my perspective, are the basis of a healthy relationship. Being able to remain authentic with yourself, honest with yourself, and doing things that feel healthy and serve you and your system. But in this context specifically, saying no allows us the chance to say, that's too much for me. That will stress me out more. That will not feel good or authentic for me. That will stress out my children or my system. And whether it's self-care or saying no, there's this guilt that gets wrapped up inside of it of I can't say no because with 1,000 reasons why. I can't advocate for my self-care time alone, 1,000 reasons why.
Which is interesting to me because in an egocentric culture where we're kind of like very individualistic, we have a very hard time being like taking care of ourselves, right? And that kind of in the same context of self-compassion. We're more compassionate towards others than we are for ourselves.
Yeah. I ask people, my clients specifically all the time, if a friend talked to you the way you talk to you, would you still be friends with them? And that gives people major pause. Right. Even as I say it to clients, I start to do my own assessment of, how did I body shame myself today? How did I invalidate my own needs for the sake of my whole system? How did I, whatever it might be. And we can shift that thinking to, one, we can't talk to ourselves like that, but two, we give our friends so much more leeway to say no, to practice self-care, to advocate for their needs and get their needs met than we give to ourselves. And my hope is we can shift that thinking.
But there's a big barrier for a lot of the clients I've worked with. And I think even for myself, maybe even you, but it's this idea of that selfishness that comes back up that you brought up a little bit ago. It's almost like I can't do this because I'm not worthy. And this kind of goes back really to the idea of maybe some narratives we picked up growing up, like you're not worthy. You don't deserve to go do this until you do this. And we are naturally harder on ourselves, right? So I think even some beginning work is that self-esteem piece for self-care.
How do you see that playing a part?
Well, if you boost your self-esteem, you start feeling some sense of worth that you do deserve these things, right? I am human. I make mistakes. Because I think a lot of times we tend to beat ourselves up for the mistakes we've made because we're imperfect, right? We shun ourselves. And then therefore it's like, well, I don't deserve to go take this hot bath and spend time away from my family, right? So building that self-esteem really kind of balances it out, kind of helps suppress some of those negative self-talk. And it's kind of like, I am deserving. I am human. And I think with self-care, you recognize, or you can realize that by doing that, engaging that consistently, you're more present
Absolutely.
You're a better version of yourself by doing that, which kind of improves your relationships and interactions and performance at work.
Which is such a backwards thought. Like, for example, in my marriage, there are times when I'm like, oh, that sounds really good, but I don't want to burden my husband. I don't want to make him take care of his children by himself, which he's more than capable. But yet I feel this inherent guilt of, no, I should just tough it through so that he doesn't have to experience extra stress.
Yeah.
And that can be a massive barrier to getting that self-care. But then when I notice I'm not getting it, I'm not exactly the most friendly to be around or most pleasant anyway. But if I take the 15 minutes, that little bit of time serves me over a much larger amount of time.
And that's why, like, even for myself, I practice self-compassion as much as possible, right? Because if I'm compassionate towards myself, I won't have to rely on my self-worth being in how much do I do for other people. Like, I'll realize that there's worth in myself to be able to engage in self-care.
And it's this interesting dynamic that happens, right? How we show up in relationships is how people treat us in relationships. So if I show up and set the example that my needs don't matter, chances are I'm going to attract friendships and relationships that aren't mutual, that don't ask about my needs, that don't feed into my needs, but rather just feed into their own. So we have to set that precedent as parents, partners, friends, that no, we have needs too. And we need to get them met too.
Yeah. What things do you do for self-care?
Well, for self-care for me, I love a good bubble bath. My kids like to invade within about 15 minutes, but I cherish the solid 15 alone. My husband does the best he can to stave them off. I also love running. I enjoy prayer or time in my Bible. Sometimes it's even being with my family. It doesn't have to always be in solitude. Although for me, it often is because I'm an introvert. But my husband, for example, he's an extrovert and he loves time with his dad, with his friends, with his system, and that fills him up. But for me, it's more of those solitude kinds of things, or time outside, or Pilates. Oh, I love Pilates. Love it.
Yeah. And you give a great wide range. They could be something as simple as giving yourself extra time in the bath, or all the way to I'm going backpacking and traveling more, right? I mean, there's a wide range, or setting boundaries, but figuring out
in the day, taking a deep breath by myself. 60 seconds. I challenge everyone who's listening today, at some point, take 60 seconds where the only thing you're doing is taking deep breaths. Breathe in for 3 and out for 6. That's all I want you to do for 60 seconds. And you'll be surprised at how much your shoulders relax, your body relaxes, and probably how much more present and pleasant you'll be around other people.
And it's okay during that time for your mind to drift. If you recognize and bring it back, that is literally the essence of being mindful. And sometimes it helps to count, right? Or the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So focusing on your senses helps you be present. I find that for self-care. If I can't go anywhere, I take a minute and just 5 things I see, 4 things I can physically touch or feel, 3 things I hear, 2 things I smell, and then 1 deep breath.
And those 5 senses, building that into your self-care. So if I'm taking a bath, what is something I can indulge in for taste that's soothing to my body? So maybe chocolate. Hopefully I'm not eating my soap. Or a glass of wine or whatever it might be. What kind of music might soothe my body in that moment? Is there aromatherapy I can engage in? But anytime we can use all 5 of those senses, the more relaxation we might see come to our body. A reprieve from our mind thinking all of the time. Internal struggle, right? How do we shut that off? How do we take a moment to let our brain rest? Even we're often dreaming of the things that are causing us stress. How do we get it to where we can let our brain truly shut off?
And it's a struggle. I mean, even us trained in this area, I mean, I struggle. There are weeks I'm like, or maybe even months, I'm like, I did not treat myself that well.
Such a good point.
And it's just not natural. It's almost like this cultural narrative that time is money. You need to be working, and not really spend time on yourself, right? It's like money is the end goal, but in the world of positive psychology, that's not a high predictor of happiness, right?
Not at all.
Practicing gratitude is, relationships, things like that. I mean, to me, those are self-care. When you're focusing on things that bring this happiness in your life and improving that mood, I think is key.
And not just doing things that we sometimes my clients will say, okay, well, I did laundry for self-care because it's taking care of myself. And I don't want it to get mixed up with chores, right? So it's not just taking a shower to get clean. It's sometimes taking a bath just to take a bath. It is taking a walk just to take a walk, not for anything else other than just the walk.
Yeah. Or grabbing your furry animal, pet, fur baby.
Except for mine. Don't grab mine. My cat's
Maybe
kind
not
of an asshole.
Cat. Okay. But even go on walks. Like I have clients that go on walks with their animal, or just spend time petting them a little bit longer and loving on them and being present with the textures, the smells of their animal, right? And
what do you do for self-care?
So exercise, reading. I like to spend time with my military friends. We tend to do that through gaming. I like spending time with my wife in terms of very intentional connection.
So more about that.
So it's self-care in a sense that I rejuvenate when we get time where we typically we go on long drives. We connect while driving. There's no interruptions, hopefully not while driving, but we're able to have that time to ourselves and connect and talk and have these questions that maybe need to be answered, that we're able to just, for some reason, we communicate really well while driving. So it just feels good. And I think that's another note of self-care. It doesn't have to be just with the self. You can invite people who enjoy those values or same things as we like to do to help kind of, I think accountability is key, right? Bringing someone else in some of these self-care activities, especially exercise is a hot one where there's accountability, maybe reading for book clubs,
stretching, whatever it might be. Anytime we can have someone join us along that feels safe. So identifying who feels safe. So for you, it's your wife. And I guess there's other people in your system that maybe wouldn't contribute positively to your self-care.
Probably not. Sometimes I'm like, why did I pick up the phone?
Yes.
But that's where those boundaries come in and I think part of that self-care in the context of boundaries is really who drains me and who rejuvenates me. And granted, we can't be perfect every time. And sometimes we need to be there for the people who might be going through something that can be draining for us. But in general, thinking about who adds to this, who am I growing with? Who do I value enough to kind of have boundaries with, but understand that there's going to be some flexibility in that.
And if we know that they're going to be draining, I encourage clients, if you can, sometimes emergencies happen and you can't. Schedule a time to talk to them, knowing that they need to talk, that feels good for you. So for me, not during my lunch break. I don't like talking to people during my lunch break in between clients because it's my 1 hour where I'm not talking. I'm alone, right? So planning it out. When is a good time? When would it be the least amount of draining on you?
And do we talk about scheduling times and alerts?
I don't remember if we did, but it's super important. So scheduling it in your phone, just like you would an appointment. And I encourage my clients, schedule every few hours, something that says, take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, go for a walk. Even affirmations. So you are strong, you are capable, things like that.
I love that. The gratitude piece. And that's what I have clients do as well. And for myself, we'll have alerts, right? Put alerts in your phone. I put alerts in my phone as well. Like, this is what you're doing. Oh yeah. Don't forget Sunday. You're going to read at 15 minutes. You're going to finish this chapter that you started or whatever, but putting reminders in there, make it a priority as we do work and the things in life that drain us. Right. And I think it's really important, and ideally, and I haven't gotten there yet, but having a balance of here's the schedule of things that drain me, but I want to balance it out with things that reward me. Right.
I'll have clients usually around session 2, we set goals, and sometime between 2 and 3, I have them also create a list of coping strategies or things that feel good for them or fill them up. And I encourage this for everyone. So sitting down and writing out as many things as you can think of, because then, okay, I'm having a stressful day. Think of it like a la carte, right? You can go look at your list and it's all laid out for you. Nope, that one's not going to do it today. Ooh, but that one. Because when we're stressed, being able to recall, this is what feels good for me, this was what would fill me up, can be really difficult. Whereas if we have them written out already and printed out, we can go and look at our menu of options and say, ooh, this one's short, so this is gonna be good. Or this one sounds like it'd feel good for my body.
Based on where you're at in that day, right?
Because it ebbs and flows, right? One day a bath is gonna feel really good for me. On a day when I am tight for time, the idea of getting in a bath makes me feel like a cat going in water. Like I don't want to do it. I don't have time. And so it gives you the ability to have options.
And I like kind of that idea of remembering that during stress, because when we're stressed, recall is not really reliable, right? So the idea of conditioning these things, that's why that schedule and reminders are really important, because it's almost like a lifestyle change, right? Treating yourself should be something that we do on a regular basis.
And making it realistic for where you are today. So for me, I would love to get back to where I was, we say BK before kids, of being able to go to the gym for 2 hours a day. That isn't going to happen in my current life stage.
Yeah.
So how do I accommodate that? How do I build in what is reasonable that doesn't create additional stress just by trying to get it done?
Yeah. And it takes time to think about that. And I think a lot of people don't even want to set time away to think about what we need, right? And I go back to the barriers again. Are we even worth it? Or I'll get to that. One kind of thing I love to do in the self-compassion realm is write a letter to yourself in third person, since we're more compassionate to more distal individuals rather than ourselves. As you write that, it tends to help breed a little more self-compassion.
Say more about that. What do you put in that letter?
So you talk to like a third person, right? I appreciate you. You're a great person, right?
Wow.
I value this about you. And so it's not as uncomfortable to tell yourself, because now you're telling somebody else. Again, easier to be more compassionate to other people, but they do this in the self-compassion work in some of their interventions there. But I love that, because it's a good starting point, because we're so hard on ourselves, and a barrier to self-care again is we don't deserve it. So starting by, well, don't talk to yourself in third person.
Yeah. Creates that space, but yet still encourages connection with ourselves. Even as a therapist who has this plethora of tools at my disposal, the idea of writing a letter to myself is somewhat jarring. Like, I appreciate myself.
Yeah.
So I can imagine for some people listening, that might be a reaction too.
Yeah.
And some things we talk about on here, such as the letter, I still want you to try them, even if you have that, like, I don't know about that. So long as it's just uncomfortable, not unhealthy or unsafe, right? But I love that idea of not just in our head saying, okay, I need to be nice to myself, but writing it out, practicing it. Yes. And when we write it out, we can revisit it.
Have you ever written a letter to yourself and had to revisit it years later? We did it.
No, but I've made my clients do it a lot. Yeah.
There's
and it's super powerful.
Yeah. There's some that I had in my master's program, wrote to ourselves. And I don't know how it got back to my parents' house at something, but I went and visited them several years later. And they gave me this thing, like, is this yours? And I opened it up and I just kind of started crying. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I could take this advice on a daily basis and have that
powerful.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's very uncomfortable, but it's very powerful. But the message was more of like, this is a message I want to continue to carry with me, this positive. And if I imagine 5 years, I don't know how many years it was in between there, but looking back, if I had this message on a continual basis, where would I be in terms of my own self-worth or sense of self, right?
So I got to ask, what was the nugget, the message that you really pulled from that struck you?
Be kind to yourself. You're good enough.
Ooh,
yeah.
Right in the feels.
Yeah. And this was when going into the PhD program where I don't know anybody that comes out of there loving themselves.
It challenges all parts of your being.
It was very timely. It was, I must say, right? So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it was a compassionate letter to myself.
What was that like for you then? And what is it like for you now? Thinking about that letter and thinking about that perspective you had then versus where you are now.
I mean, it definitely influences kind of some of the approaches I take in practice, right? But even for myself, because now I know the value of it. I experienced it, so I know the value of it. So now it motivates me to kind of continue those things. And my wife and I would do little appreciation things. There's compassion for other as well, right? So she would write on sticky notes little things she appreciates about me, and I would do the same for her. And they'd be sitting there for months. But you go, like, when you're feeling down, I look at the fridge, that's where we have them. And I look at some of the stuff that she said she appreciated about me, right? To help with that.
And that little act of self-care.
Yes.
Even though your wife wrote it, keeping it where you can see it, revisiting it, giving yourself what would probably be 3 seconds to reread it and actually take it in. That little boost of self-care, I imagine, has a lasting effect, much more than 3 seconds.
Yeah. And writing, it's there, right? Whereas we say, like, one day you have a fleeting thought, which is positive. That's great. But writing it down is just, it's a little more lasting, right? And it encodes differently. And you can go back to it and be like, oh yeah, I remember that. That's how I said that to myself.
I love that. That is powerful. What else do you do that's kind of those small, everyday little things to build in self-care or
Mhm.
to really honor yourself in your space?
A lot of mine is kind of giving myself compassion, because I'm really hard on myself, right?
I can attest to this.
After a PhD program, it's inevitable. But I like some of the stuff that comes from the mindful self-compassion world of just finding a place that I really like to put my hand on my shoulders and rub them, and just be compassionate, use compassionate language towards myself, with the breathing. So more of a mindfulness self-compassion approach. And that I can do myself. And when I feel myself getting tense, or I'm waiting for like a nerve-wracking appointment or something, I'm just like with the doctor, right? I'm just kind of just being kind to myself on a more consistent basis, because I spent many years, and like a lot of people, we beat ourselves up. And so it's just trying to put a little more balance back in that. And that's kind of the little tidbit stuff, because it doesn't take much for me to just kind of like rub my shoulder. That's the one I like more. Or you can hug yourself, or, you can rub your hands, hold your own hands. Sometimes I do that, actually, hold my own hand.
I love that.
So how about for you? Anything that you kind of do?
Oh, a big one for me is my faith. So even taking a few minutes to read some of my favorite Bible verses, or to go to prayer, or I really rest in that God has a plan for me. And so reminding myself of that, or having my partner and I talk through it, but also reminding myself of, okay, whatever task it is feels huge right now. It feels monumental, or there's no way I'm going to get to this goal. And reminding myself 5 years ago, what was the goal I didn't think I could meet, that I have long since surpassed. So grounding myself in, this is a moment, one difficult moment. That's it. It's not my life. It's not the entirety of my day, my week, my year. It is just a moment.
I love that, because when we're stressed, we get the idea of permanence, right? And we fail to see the big picture of like, this isn't going to last forever. Because when we get that stuck in this idea of presence, we feel trapped. That's overwhelming. Maybe even panic attacks ensue, right? Depending on the extent of it. Yeah. So that perspective is huge. So you kind of challenge yourself, or try to provide yourself with perspective
and grounding. And because I love the idea of bubble baths every day, and sometimes it's not feasible. So how do we build in that self-care and self-love, self-acceptance in ways that do feel feasible? And that's one for me.
Yeah. And I think an important question too, that I ask myself, but I think everyone should ask themselves, is why are you not deserving?
Good question.
It wouldn't make sense.
We think everyone else is, but not us.
Yeah.
I had a moment with a client, and we were talking about one of my favorite things I tell clients is grace over guilt. Give yourself grace rather than feeling the guilt. And we talk about how to do that and all the stuff. But she said something to the effect of, I don't deserve grace. And I said, oh, do your kids deserve grace? And she said, yeah, of course. And I said, so at what age do you stop giving them grace? And she was like, well, never. They're my children. And I said, oh, so when did yours expire? And that was a moment for her where she was just like, oh, and it was jarring for her to then be like, shit, I deserve it just like my kids, just like my parents, just like my partner. And what's funny is therapists don't talk about this piece. We'll have these moments where we say things to clients like that are pretty poignant. And inside I'm like, oh, that includes me too, doesn't it? Like, I also have not expired on my grace.
Yeah. I love that question. I asked something similar, depending on the context, but a situation where people take care of everyone but themselves. I was like, who takes care of you? Well, no one. It's even more important to take care of yourself.
And it really gives people pause. Yeah. Think about that for those who are listening. When was the last time you really just spent time focusing only on yourself? Not taking the bath and thinking about, is my husband okay with the children, but really indulging in just yourself.
Yeah.
When was the last time as a regular practice, if ever, a regular practice? What kind of messages has your family, your system given to you about this? How do we overcome that? I also think about I have 2 girls, and do I want them being raised in a home where self-care is something that's frowned upon and riddled with guilt? Or do I want them in a home where they know boundaries and saying no and self-care are super important?
Yeah.
And it's the latter. Even my 4-year-old, she'll turn to me and say, Mom, I need peace and quiet, or Mom, I need my space. And that's something we really try to model, is even at her age, she's allowed to say, I need time away.
Yeah.
I need to go have solitude. I need a hug or a break or whatever it might be. but making sure we're modeling that.
Or something I love that you say is honor thyself. We deserve it. We're all getting through this life, this world, right?
There's no everyone except you. It's all of us are human and make human mistakes and have very real human feelings and need time to slow down and heal.
Yeah. And I would challenge those who are willing to kind of take on a journey in self-care to also track your mood. So you can see how your mood is fluctuating in these times that you do self-care. And it might be informative to be like, oh my God, I feel better. Or you might be like, that activity did not actually improve my mood.
Such a good point.
To get a little more insight about what's happening. Yeah.
Even journaling in the morning and night. And then on either side of that, self-care activity, if there's something specific of how has your mood changed? How has your body changed? Often we think of just mood, but it's not just how we're feeling cognitively. It's how's our muscles?
Yeah.
How am I feeling in my jaw? How am I feeling in terms of the stiffness of my body, the tension of my body?
Yeah. And I think ultimately too, self-care says, I'm not going to only have to rely on other people for my self-worth. I'm going to build that myself because I am worthy and I'm going to take care of myself. I am worth it. The
core of healthy relationships, not having this sense of codependence where it's someone else's responsibility.
Yes.
But we take it on ourselves and advocate for that.
Yeah.
While of course honoring, there are times that saying to my husband, I need to take a bath and he's looking worn out and panicked with our children being hooligans. Probably not the best time to turn and say, I'm going to go take a bath.
Yeah.
So there can be a balance of here are my needs and I can still honor other people.
Yeah. And having a conversation, because I think in context of relationships, taking time for yourself is extremely important, but having that conversation of what that looks like and making sure there's reciprocity and we're giving time for others to have that space for themselves. Like you said, making sure that's kind of something in the household. That's really the message that you're given to everyone, that they have that privilege as well. And
I love this topic. I could talk about it for hours. I talk about with every client, building this in, no matter what clients are coming to us for, no matter what I'm struggling with, what my family's struggling with, self-care always plays a role.
Absolutely.
Are you doing the things to take care of yourself while this other stuff is going on? Have you shown yourself compassion? Have you been gentle with yourself? And if not, we got to pivot.
And I love when clients I'm working with that are experiencing depression, it kind of also serves as like a behavioral activation. So you're going to go do something, but I want it for you to do something that's engaged in self-care that rejuvenates you, right? Not just go walk. If you don't like it, then you're not going to reward. But it's just such profound differences, right? After they make it a life of engaging in self-care compared to not doing anything before, letting kind of the depression take over and say, stay home, don't do anything, isolate, you're not worth it, to kind of challenging that and saying, I'm going to kick your ass and I'm going to go out and I'm going to enjoy myself and I'm going to live my life.
Love that. And as always, if anyone has any questions about self-care or anything we're talking about, or ways we can help you brainstorm self-care strategies for you, feel free to email us at relationshipsinsideout@gmail.com.
Yeah. And we'll be talking about it more. We're only brushing the surface a lot of times. So great.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.